Welcome to 1991 Movie Rewind, a podcast where we watch and review every movie released in 1991, from the all-time greatest classics to the critically panned and everything in between. We will rediscover forgotten fan favorites and uncover hidden gems as we explore the depths of direct-to-video. Join us in our celebration of the fun, unique, and diverse films of this highly underrated year. This week, we watched Father of the Bride.
Hi, this is Nikki.
And this is Jon, and thank you for joining us in 1991 Movie Rewind. In Father of the Bride, George Banks, played by Steve Martin, recounts all of the events leading up to the wedding of his only daughter Annie, played by Kimberly Williams-Paisley. George is taken aback by the surprise engagement announcement and becomes increasingly flustered as he is not only losing his little girl, but also more money than he ever expected on this elaborate celebration. Screenplay by Francis Goodrich, Albert Hackett, Nancy Meyers, and Charles Shire, directed by Charles Shire, and released on December 20th, 1991. You've seen Father of the Bride before.
Yes.
Yeah. This is one of the few that I have also seen. I know that, most of the time I say no, or I don't even remember, but this is one that I have seen. And probably because I've seen most of the major hits, not all of them, but I've seen most of the major hits, and this was a major hit. It was number 9 on our box office list. Huge performance on this one. I don't remember what happened in the movie, though, because I think I only saw it when it first came out.
Oh, okay. Because I've seen both movies, Father of Bride 1 and 2, so many times that I just remembered everything, I guess. And it was just on cable a lot. Yeah,
I would imagine it probably was. I don't even know if I've seen the second. I honestly can't fully remember if I've seen the second one, but we saw this one, we rented the video and everything, but it's been so long that I kind of remembered it differently. I thought this was going to be, I don't know, more like a zany madcap money pit type of a movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, more things would go wrong.
Yeah, things were going to go wrong, and that more physical comedy involved, things like that. Think about the scene where Steve Martin, George, and Diane Keaton are meeting the in-laws for the first time.
Yeah.
And so, Steve is, ransacking the office and finding the bank book, and then he has to hide the fact that he found the bank book because it somehow landed outside into the pool and all this kind of stuff. And so, it ends with him falling into the pool.
Yeah, and then that's the end of the scene.
And he's hanging off the ledge, and then he falls into a pool later on. I thought there was more scenes like that.
Right.
In this whole thing.
That scene just ended, and then it wasn't... when he comes... How does he explain his wet clothes when he comes back inside? And
yeah, I wanted to know what happened at the end of that, because basically what's going on is George is jealous of the rich in-laws, the person that Annie is marrying. What is he? Brian Mackenzie. Yeah. So he's going to see Brian's parents and meet them, and they're super rich. They live in this massive mansion, and George is extremely jealous of the whole situation, and so he finds their bank book while snooping after going to the bathroom, and they have attack dogs. They're chasing him or cornering him in this office because they're growling, and he's not supposed to be there. He's an intruder. And so he climbs out the window, loses the bank book in the pool because he tries to toss it up and fails because a lot of weird circumstances.
Yeah, their housekeeper was cleaning their rugs or whatever, and taking the dust out of it, and that just pushed it. Just went into the pool, but
and then he tried to get out of the pool.
Yeah, he tried to get it out of the pool, and he falls in, obviously. But why couldn't he just leave the bank book there? And just the Mackenzies can be like, hey, what the fuck? Why is my bank book here?
Right.
I would just leave it. I wouldn't even try.
But I mean, we wanted to see what the conversation was because he's in the pool and he's wet, and then cut scene onto the next, and it's not mentioned again until later on.
Yeah, when
Brian admits that
they
or tells
sort
his
of break
daughter.
up for like a day.
Yeah.
Annie and Brian, and that's when George goes into Annie's room and explaining like all the things why she wants to end the marriage, and then she's like, and then he had this crazy story about you, and it's just exactly what he did at their house meeting them.
So they obviously didn't get out of it. I just wish we would have known what happened
like
there.
Seeing that cringy moment of him trying to get out of it.
Yeah, and in my mind as a kid, I don't know, like my memory got swayed, and I guess I remember more of that physical type of comedy, or more of those like quirky happenstances of where he's trying to accomplish something or correct his wrong, and the world is against him in the form of the rug batting the bank book back. I thought there was more stuff like that happened to him, like more, again, like more Money Pit type of stuff where they're trying to fix something and then another thing breaks. And he's just like putting out fires all the time. That's what I remembered the movie being like. I also remember there being more scenes where the money became a factor. So the wedding planner, aka the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
Martin Short and B.D. Wong as Frank Egelhofer and Howard Weinstein, respectively. I thought that they were in it a little bit more, and that the costs were presented as more of a surprise to them. To George and the family.
Yeah.
But really, it was just like one or two scenes where, we're doing this, and this, and here's the bill.
Yeah.
It didn't escalate and keep on growing and growing and growing. Just, it's $250 a head. Here's your cost. And there you go.
So, I thought, because then when they have it at the house, this was like when Frank and Howard first see their house, and he's like, oh, the shutters, everything's great, but we have to change everything.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, very, very nice. We'll change it all, though.
Yeah. That... And then it kind of looked as if, like, it was like Alice in Wonderland-ish. Like, they had people it looked as if they were literally painting roses pink. I don't, like, were they doing that?
I don't know.
Like, it kind of looked like someone was doing that, like, right before the wedding. And then, they get married on January 6th. And, they're in Southern California, but for some mysterious, like...
magical
global warming reason, it snows a lot in Southern California.
Yeah, they said it was like the first time it happened in like 60 years or something like that.
Right.
So, they understand it's not a common occurrence and not an expected one either, I guess. But when it's snowing, they don't even act like it's cold out. Even though in LA, people who are in like 60-degree weather are shivering.
If it was snowing there, wouldn't it have melt like the next day?
It kind of
and
does.
And it would have been
in a
like
way.
Muddy, but wouldn't it have been muddy though?
Probably. I don't know. Like, you're getting into really nitpicky stuff.
I know. That's where.
I just thought it would be like. I thought George would be upset because all of this outdoor decorations would be basically ruined, or that he had to like shift more stuff outside into inside. I mean, he may have been disappointed, but they didn't address that in the movie.
Yeah.
They just showed them like shoveling the walk and like the lady trying to hair dry the
flowers. Yeah, and then they had to bring their swans into their bathtub so it can be warm.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a little bit there, but I guess it just goes to show that your memory of a movie that you've seen 30 years later can morph into different stuff, and so this is a lot different than what I had expected.
I mean, we also saw the 1951, like
the original 1950 movie.
The original one.
Yeah, we saw that like
a few years ago.
I don't remember why we decided to watch that.
I have no idea. I don't know.
I have no idea why we decided to watch that, but we did. I don't remember a whole lot of that either, but I do have my notes from when we watched that.
Similar. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be. I mean, it's the same story where, the father has to pay for everything, and everything is just piling up with how much the cost is for this wedding.
Yeah, I feel...
I mean, I can't remember. They didn't have some over-the-top wedding planner.
No, they didn't. And
I mean, that's what makes this movie so much better, is Martin Short and B.D. Wong.
And I'm wondering, is this near the beginning of, like, the wedding coordinator, wedding planner thing? Because George is confused that that's even a job, that you hire people to do that instead of doing it yourself
right,
within the family.
Like the beginning of it, yeah.
And, I was too young at the time, so I don't know if that was a common thing earlier than this, but this may have been the start of something of, like, a newer trend.
Yeah, okay.
In the 90s.
Well, I mean,
they wanted to accommodate that.
Yeah, and one of the best, like, one-liners in the movie is welcome to the 90s, Mr. Bonk.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Martin Short has this outlandish accent, which is literally what the captions of the version that we watched said. This outlandish accent.
In parentheses.
And it's not supposed to be a specific country, I don't think. It kind of morphs into multiple different regions and countries. Like, it wants to be, like...
Yeah, it's like various European countries. Like, it wants to be French and German and Italian.
Yeah, and it kind of like, shifts back and forth depending on what syllable enunciation would be funnier for the specific word. Yeah, like when he says
cake.
Yeah, it's like cock.
Yeah. So, I mean, whenever he says that... he says it like out of the side of his mouth, but he's like cock.
Yeah, so it's very hard to understand him without subtitles even sometimes, but
right. And you have, and George is like the only person that doesn't understand him, and Nina and Annie are translating. They're like, cake, Dad, or George, or whatever. Like, don't you know? But he's probably like, what?
Yeah.
Well, he is like what?
He is like what? So yeah, the 1950s movie did not have that type of a thing. I feel like that one did stuff a little bit better than this newer version, and then this newer version did stuff that's better than the original, of course. I felt a lot more sympathy for Spencer Tracy's character in the 1950s one. He was being run ragged. Steve Martin is just complaining about the money, but Tracy had to do like everything in that movie. Like at one point, like he was bartending for the entire party, and like he was doing all this kind of other stuff, and it just got kind of overboard. The 1950s also had like a really cool dream sequence that was kind of like a Hitchcock or Salvador Dali thing, and that doesn't exist here either. So there's like some weird stuff that happens in that one. Spencer Tracy, I think, was Oscar nominated for his performance in that movie. You could double check my work on that. And then you have Liz Taylor as the daughter, who is super melodramatic. In this movie, Annie's just kind of there for the most part to be like the straight man, or just to be the level set. She's kind of like caught in the middle of her own wedding and isn't given much to contribute into the wedding planning itself, in a way. It's like it's all Franck, and she just kind of goes along with whatever. Yeah,
she's just whatever Franck is saying is the best. She's like, okay, well, I want the best.
Yeah, if my parents are okay with this, then we're gonna go with it.
She's like, if we're okay with it, like the whole thing with the cake, she wants the $1,200 cake. Mm-hmm. Even like these prices that they're talking about in the 90s are like still expensive to me.
Oh yeah.
Like a $1,200 cake and $250 a head.
And they're talking about 572 people is what they said.
Yeah.
So
this is like a $200,000 wedding.
It's a situation where they're also doing it at George's house.
And it's still that much money. But
yeah. So that's sort of, where this movie is rich people problems.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, this is just... I was like, I mean, I know they're making when this episode comes out, we're going to have the one with Gloria Estefan and
Andy Garcia,
but I mean,
we'll
see how that is. Yeah,
recorded this.
We wouldn't have watched it.
So,
but, I know that, but just from seeing the commercials and promos for it, they seem like they're a well-to-do family. So it's like this movie is not. He said we live in, I forgot what small little town.
Yeah, like not San Mateo because that's northern, right?
San Marino, which is not really a real town, but it's like a neighborhood. So I don't know. It's like near Pasadena when I looked it up.
Okay.
So they're like in the outskirts of LA, and then the Mackenzies, they live in Bel Air. Mm-hmm. So they are the 1%. So they're like, George and Nina are just like, middle class or upper middle class. Because, I mean, George owns his own shoe company.
Mm-hmm. And the wife, Diane Keaton's character, Nina, also has a business, apparently.
Yeah.
But I don't know what.
I don't
It's just a throwaway line at one point where they say they both own businesses.
Right.
Or they both run successful businesses. Okay. I don't know. So yeah, this movie is not so much about, oh my gosh, weddings are so expensive. It is in a way that, but it's more that it's George fighting against his family because he wants to keep costs reasonable for this wedding, whereas everyone else is just saying, yeah, who cares about money? Like, who cares about a budget? Nina is saying, we don't go to Europe. We don't do this. We don't have fancy cars, which is not true.
Yeah, they had nice
George
stuff.
has a super fancy convertible that you see in the first scene.
Right.
They have a decent house, which, obviously could have been a lot less money when he bought it. That's what he says, that this was,
yeah,
the house cost less than
the
cake or whatever.
The cake. I mean, that's like a $1,000 house.
Yeah, I mean, he's exaggerating, but, but yeah, Nina's basically saying, yeah, let's spend our money on this, which is what a lot of parents think if you have the means, and these people have the means.
Even like
so it's not about they're going to go bankrupt.
Annie, she's, I mean, I don't know, this is like her last year of college because she's traveling, or she's going to school abroad in Italy, and that's how she meets Brian.
Yeah.
And then she wants to be an architect.
Yeah, and Brian is some sort of tech person, independent contractor.
Like independent, because
helping
that was
set
like
up
a whole
computer networks is basically what they said. Yeah,
and
they try to make a joke out of the whole job.
The independent, like, what is independent means you're unemployed.
Yeah,
it's like, why are you independent and not working for a company?
And so they.
I mean, and then even the Mackenzies do offer to pay for some of this wedding, and George is like too proud of a person. He's like, oh, they think that we can't afford this. I'm not going to allow them to pay for anything. I will.
Right, so he digs his own grave. And that's why I'm saying it's easier to feel more for, Spencer Tracy's character in the original, because he's literally like, he's overwhelmed. He is way over his head in multiple ways. So I think that one does it better than this. This
just brings the comedy.
It does, but it also doesn't at times. It's a weird mix. They have like little
or
scenes
like
where
this heartwarming thing where it's like the father is losing his daughter. Like he's like, oh, my daughter, my little baby is all grown up, and it's that whole thing. Well, like he's going through this existential crisis.
Mm-hmm. It's a nice mix. I think this movie creates a really good balance of comedy and, heartfelt emotions. Mm-hmm. It's Nancy Meyers, so it has a better chance of doing that than if it were other writers. I want to mention that, we have 4 credited screenwriters here. Francis Goodrich and Albert Hackett are really just on here because they wrote the original. Francis Goodrich had actually passed away before this movie was made. She passed in 1984. They are a husband and wife screenwriting duo behind this, and also Father's Little Dividend, which was the basis for the sequel to Father of the Bride. The second movie.
One, yeah.
And then they've also written things like Thin Man, After the Thin Man, Diary of Anne Frank, where they won a Tony and a Pulitzer for the play version of that. Oscar nominated for Seven Brides and Seven Brothers. And they also did It's a Wonderful Life. So they're very prolific, and, they were given their dues here. And then Nancy Meyers and Charles Shire, the other husband and wife duo who wrote this. So you have that balance, and I don't think this movie is overly funny, nor does it have to be.
No.
And so, like, when the comedy happens, it's good. There's a lot of different types of comedy. Like, you have that one scene of the physical comedy that we talked about before with the pool, and then you have a lot of it is based off of Steve Martin's facial reactions and how he's reacting to Brian touching Annie's leg, or how he's reacting to the announcement of the engagement in the first place, and all these other little things, watching his emotions bubble up and the anger kind of swell in his head. That's supposed to be part of the comedy of this whole thing. And then there's the situational stuff, and then there's the linguistic stuff with Franck. There's a lot of different mixes in there. But yeah, like the very first scene, you have George talking to the camera because the wedding had just ended. And he's going through this like little monologue about the shittiness of weddings, basically.
Yeah.
And how it's like something they don't really touch on a whole lot is how a lot of the costs that are involved feel like a scam. You kind of get that impression with the Franck and Howard stuff, but it's not overtly stated. George never says, "Oh, this is robbery." No one's ever trying to accuse them of pushing up the costs of unnecessary stuff. He's just trying to keep the costs down.
Right. So, yeah, Franck is always showing Annie, like, the best place settings and, stuff like that. And she's like, oh, well, that would look great. And then she looks to her dad, like George, and he doesn't say no to his daughter ever. Mm-hmm. And she's like, but Annie is just like, it's okay with me if you're okay with it, Dad. And then he just never really says no to her. So he's like, okay. But, I mean, afterwards when he's home with Nina sees that he's stressing over this. Even when this was like another weird thing. It's like they had to pay for the family members, like the Mackenzie's family members that were in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
Like their flights and stuff. And I was like, why? Well, why couldn't they just pay for themselves?
To fly across the country. Or fly across the ocean.
I understand it's like per quote tradition for like wedding planning. It's like the bride's parents to pay for the wedding, but why do they have to pay for all the people to attend?
Yeah, it's only been 30-something years since this movie came out, but I think that just traditions and
dealing with these
customs have changed since then by quite a large margin. I don't know if that was actually a thing back then or if that's just something they exaggerated for comedy's sake.
Yeah, it's like they had to pay for 9 seats because one of the family members is, overweight and takes up 2 seats.
Yeah.
And then when they're going over the list of people that have either declined or accepted, it's like more accepted invites are coming in, and then like they're sitting at the table and Annie's like, didn't so and so die? And he's like, yes. he's like,
super happy about
he's super happy because it's like one less person they has to pay
Saves
for.
$250.
And then they're like, and Annie's just like, Dad, like, why are you happy that he died? And then you have, the little brother, Maddie, who I was like, what is their age difference? Like,
it's significant.
Like 10 years?
Probably. I don't know. I mean, I think Kieran Culkin
he was like,
probably less
like
than
9.
10. Because in real life at least, because Macaulay was about our age when he
was like 11.
Home Alone. Well, I guess he's still the same as our age.
Yeah, he is our age.
You know, time moves in parallel for both of us. We've just aged differently. But Kieran Culkin was always the younger one, so he was probably like 8-ish at the most, I would guess. Here.
I mean, Annie is
and
22.
Annie's listed as 22 in the movie.
I was like, so they waited, I don't know
if they waited.
More than 10 years?
I mean, you could give the spoiler for part 2, right? So, I mean, things happen.
Yeah, things just happen. So, yeah, and then, for part 2, that's when the entire second movie is about Annie and Nina being pregnant at the same time, and then they have their kids at the same time. I mean, that's, like, very, like, parenthood.
And I think it may be part of my misunderstanding
was like
mixing those two movies up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I haven't seen either of those in a long time.
So, I mean, that baby is like 22 years. I mean, Annie is 22 years. I mean, they even say in this movie, George is like, she's 22. And then
she's way too young to get married.
Yeah, and Nina is like, we got married when we were 21. And I was 22 when we had Annie.
And he keeps on saying, well, that's different.
Yeah, he just always says that's different.
Yeah, all the points that are made to establish Annie as an adult with real situation, like real awareness and making her own decisions. George is like, well, that was different when it was us, and now it's different because it's her.
Yeah.
Which is a very, typical reaction you would have
for like any father,
overprotective father there. I mean, overprotective may not be the right word. In some situations it is. But, even in that opening scene, like I was saying, he was talking about the shittiness and very jaded about weddings, but he also goes into a monologue talking about what it's like to have a daughter and, like, talking about key moments of her life and all these little things where, like, the small details are the biggest of them all. Mm-hmm. There aren't any real memorable lines for me in that whole sequence, but just emotionally, it hits just, like, the right way. You know, it's just written so purely that it has that perfect... It's not too sappy, and it's not trite. It's just...
I think that's a Nancy Meyers thing.
Yeah, that's the quality that Nancy Meyers brings to a movie. And that happens throughout in various different ways, and it never really gets old, which is great. I love the dynamic between father and daughter here, and that's really the main focus of this. We have Annie and Brian's relationship, but I don't really know anything about them. I don't really feel the chemistry between them, but it's not the focus of the movie.
Yeah, not really.
It doesn't really matter. It's about what George is going through and how Annie can help bring him to terms with her life changing.
Yeah, he's just doing anything for his little girl, and there is a part where she falls asleep on the couch and she has like a Cosmo magazine on her or
something about like how to have a cheaper wedding.
10 tips to make your wedding cheaper or whatever, and he's reading it, and then he just kind of like, he's like, I'm just gonna give her whatever she wants at this point.
Yeah, a lot of the key revelations are told through narration, which is established in that opening scene, so it doesn't feel super out of place when it happens later on. I think we have to talk about the supermarket scene.
Yeah, that's when he goes off the rails. Well,
that's like a whole nother kind of different type of comedy in a sense, I would say. It's kind of like taking what would be like a George Carlin stand-up bit and then bringing it to a real world setting,
Yeah, I mean, that's when, I don't know, is this pre-reading the magazine or post-reading? I think it's before he reads the magazine. He goes up into the attic and he's putting on one of his old tuxedos from like 30 years ago. And he's like really like struggling to get in.
I mean, it fits him,
like,
although it
tightly.
does. Yeah, it fits him, but tightly, and then eventually as part of something of this frantic thing with Frank and 30 different people in his house trying to talk about different plans, flowers, catering,
things are
all this other
escalating,
stuff.
And then
he's trying to open a door and it rips when he's trying to open the door,
and that just like sends him off the rails, and he goes to the supermarket to look for hot dogs and hot dog buns.
Yeah,
but his argument, every time I think of hot dogs, I always think about this argument, though.
Yeah, it's sort of an iconic thing, which I don't believe is a problem anymore.
Oh, really? Do they sell 8 buns?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is it because of this movie? I should have looked that up.
I think I think this sort of. But I mean, it was kind of a. It's like a stand-up comedy thing for a while before it even happened. You know what I mean? Like it's. Did quirky observation of life is like, hey, how come hot dogs come
like
in
Seinfeld
8,
type level?
But buns are in 6. What's the deal?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was like, did Steve Martin come up with that? Was this his comedy?
That's tough to know. I mean, his stand-up comedy was much more absurdist rather than observational.
Okay, I'm just wondering.
And he stopped stand-up comedy.
Who came up with the hot dog?
In the late 70s, I think, or early 80s, he stopped doing stand-up.
Well, I don't know. You know, I don't know. Like, did Nancy Meyers, like, who wrote this scene? I'm like, was this like a Nancy Meyers collab with Steve Martin?
It could be.
I guess I should have looked that up too. Like, who came up with this scene?
Who knows that the answer's out there? But the whole thing is these ripping hot dog buns out of the package because he only wants to pay for X number of buns, and you know, the number of buns in the package don't align with the number of hot dogs in the hot dog package.
Yeah, you have more buns than the hot dogs, and then it's like you have to buy the more hot dogs and whatever.
Yeah. So depending on what you do, you either have to buy more than what you want of both, or you're overpaying and buying stuff that you don't want.
But he's like opening 3 or 4 different packages of hot dog buns and taking 4 buns out.
Yeah.
And he has like only 2 or 3 hot dogs, like packages.
He could have made the math work if he wanted to.
Yeah.
But the problem is, you know, he's not in the right frame of mind.
Yeah,
He's
I mean,
just,
at this point, he's
by
like
everything.
Yeah, at this point, he's like over the top, just had it.
And the workers confront him over the whole thing, and they're like, "You still have to pay for whatever." And he like tries to run away in a sense, but he's like running away in the store. So I mean, that didn't really.
And then he goes. I mean, this whole thing of him going to like the jail was like a 1920s jail.
Yeah. That's like a small time Wild West jail.
Yeah, I was like, what era
cell.
Is this?
Basically, like the drunk tank holding cell type of a thing that you see in sitcoms.
He's just there for a night.
Not even. I mean, Nina comes to bail him out, and then that's when they have sort of the heart-to-heart talk and saying, "Look, you need to cool your shit, get your act together, and do this for your daughter."
Yeah, like stop rolling your eyes and, you know, huffing and puffing and sighing or whatever whenever you hear a dollar amount for anything.
I mean, it's valid.
Yeah, I mean,
it's valid.
I would
just because Nina doesn't care about the
anxiety. expense
doesn't mean that George shouldn't. I don't know. It's weird that Nina doesn't care about this at all. To me, I mean, her reasoning is like, oh, we don't have fancy cars and we don't go to Europe, so we can spend the money
like,
on this.
why don't we use all our... Yeah, it's
like, what was the math? Like $150,000 basically?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It's probably 200,000. I mean, if you add like her dress and the cake and like all their clothes, I don't know, and then having to buy the plane tickets for these out of town people.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's an amazing amount of money. So I would have expected a little bit more conversation on that.
I mean, this is like,
be like, hey, we could buy her a house for the cost of this. You know what I mean? Like they could have had
they
that
could
kind
have
of dialogue in
honestly
there.
bought a house. And this is like, as someone who's like young watching this, like you're just like, is this the expectations for all weddings?
It honestly stuck in my mind when like we were planning our wedding.
That's why I was like, I don't want any of this shit.
Yeah, like, let's not go too crazy if we
Well,
can
I
help
didn't
it,
even
and,
want any of it. I was like, let's just go to Vegas and be done with it. But like, I didn't like this movie. I think caused like anxiety in me in like wedding planning.
Yeah, and just the idea of how,
if you watch this movie,
how out of control costs can get very, very quickly.
I mean, even when we
careful.
did start looking for wedding stuff, just like having to pay for tables and chairs, I'm like, no, I am not going to.
Yeah. It was so strange. It was such a weird experience.
The amount. Yeah, just I don't know. Wedding planning sucks. I mean, this is that's what this movie is portraying.
And it's incredibly stressful. But in this movie, it's really only stressful to George. Is kind of
like
odd.
everyone is having fun with it except for him because he's paying for it all.
So that's what you have to deal with, and then the in-laws give them a car as a wedding present before the wedding. All these gifts are coming through before the wedding. Yeah, I was like,
all these dumb traditions where it's like the parents have to give the children the wedding gifts prior to the wedding, and then like the husband, or like not even, the fiancés have to give each other like a pre-gift.
I don't remember if we did that or not.
No,
honestly,
I don't know. I mean,
I certainly didn't give you a blender like Brian gave.
And then that's when Annie flipped out.
Yeah, which is understandable within the context of the movie.
Yeah,
right. Like they do a good job of unraveling,
explaining her insecurities with that, or yeah.
And the two sides of the whole situation where she's like, okay, this is a symbol of how he really just wants me to stay at home and
be a housewife.
A housewife, which is antithetical to what he told me before. And meanwhile, he's like, she really likes making banana smoothies. I thought,
yeah, I mean, that's
make her
exactly
life easier.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like how we think.
I mean, yeah, that kind of thing, that kind of misunderstanding does happen.
I give this to you because you said you always needed like, I don't know, a butter knife or something. Yeah. And then I'd be like, what the fuck is this? Yeah. I don't know.
Well, you're always talking about this problem, and I was trying to solve that. It's like, well, this isn't a fun present. Like,
yeah, I think she wanted something fun.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the present that George gives them, like an espresso machine, I was like, I would want that.
That'd be kind of cool.
Even though I don't know how to use one. I'd probably use it once, and then that was
Yes, you would. And so, I mean, that's really the only scene where we see any insecurities coming from Annie or any of the stress of the wedding coming out on Annie's side, is when the blender gift is happening. She's like, the wedding's off, and this is like as soon as George is like finally accepting the whole situation, and he's happy, and then
he doesn't really like Brian
just because he's taking away his
daughter. But Brian's doing these things like George even says like he's brown nosing big time, and I don't like it.
Yeah. And
Brian is calling him dad immediately and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's
or even Annie is just calling him George, and he's like, where is this coming from?
Uh-huh.
And so he's just like, I don't like him, but he eventually likes him, and then that's when the whole story about he goes to Annie, and then Annie's crying, and he's trying to calm both of them down, and he does that within a night because he takes Brian out to drinks.
Yeah, he basically just gives Brian's side of the story, and then it's up to George as to whether or not he wants to actually sabotage the wedding, because he could if he wanted to.
Yeah, he could, but he's like, no, I want to do this for my daughter.
Yeah. They
obviously love each other, but there was just a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And then, that was like a one-night breakup, and then, wedding happens.
Yeah, there's a couple things that we haven't talked about in terms of scenes. I think one is the basketball montage we haven't talked about so much.
Okay.
I mean, I think that, again, just reiterating, I really like the way that they portrayed the relationship between the two and gave them, an actual solid foundation of a relationship, and how they have their little things that they do. And so they're playing one-on-one against each other and doing all kinds of like jokey things, and you know, and then that comes back near the end when she's having, her last minute thoughts about the wedding. You can't sleep because she's so nervous and everything, and they just talk and play basketball, and that's when it snows. Like, it's a good way to pull everything together. When we get to the wedding, though, I was really kind of taken aback at how long that scene was with absolutely no jokes. It's just like a straight up wedding scene.
It's just
where you see a lot of it, in my opinion. Too much.
It's just George trying to connect. He just wants to give Annie a hug and.
That's the reception. I'm talking about the actual wedding part in the church.
Oh.
Like, that was dreadfully long to me.
I don't know. That was fine.
I don't know. I just expected some sort of comedy, I guess.
I think that was just more of a heart-to-heart, because even Maddie wants to help out, and he's like, with the stepping.
Yeah, but that was even before the wedding.
I don't know, but even during, he was like, hey, I wrote it down on my hand so I don't forget left together, right together, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, it's mostly George, he's the nervous one, and then he was just saying how Annie is so calm and cool about this whole thing.
I just didn't like that scene. It was like the key scene.
It was more of like a heart-to-heart instead of being funny.
I know, but it wasn't even anything unusual. Like, there was no, like, custom vows.
Oh, okay.
There's no unique dialogue. It was like, do you take this person?
And they're
yes.
Like, yeah.
Do you take this person? Yes.
I mean, I guess the quote comedy.
All the standard stuff. And, like, I was like, okay, when is something funny gonna happen? Yeah,
or anything.
Is something funny gonna happen? Is something more heartfelt gonna happen? And I really didn't feel it.
I guess the only heartfelt thing is when, like, the Mackenzie, Brian's dad starts like bawling instead of like George is the one he wants to cry, but he's like keeping it in, and then he looks over and he sees like the Mackenzies bawling.
Yeah.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah, you could probably count that. I mean, that considering facial reactions and cutaway shots to how people look are a lot of the comedy in some of these scenes. But yeah, at the end, like in the reception, the house is just so packed that George can't find Annie at all throughout the whole time.
Yeah, it's just him trying to find her, just to say, give her a hug and
kiss the bride
and that's it.
And it never happens. Instead, you get like the cars are triple parked on the street, and because they only have 2 valets.
Well,
and
I
so
mean, that whole thing, I was like, how can you, if you live in a residential street and you have like 500 people coming to your wedding,
you gotta rent buses.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the comedy comes when, like, Maddie and his one friend, I forgot his name already.
Cameron, played by Chauncey Leopardi, best known as Squints from The Sandlot.
Yeah, so George just looks at Maddie and his friend. They were like, hey, you want to park some cars? So, I mean, that's the comedy there.
Seeing these 8-year-olds
these
who are
little kids driving cars. But I was like, how can they reach their legs down to the accelerator and all this stuff?
Probably can't.
And then try to see over that dashboard. But I mean, that was the comedy. And then he had to move these cars himself, like on their lawn. I mean, wouldn't that ruin the lawn? But whatever.
You gotta do what you gotta do. But I mean, that's almost the end of the movie. Like, they have a phone call where Annie calls and says, hey, I missed you, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, and this like another tradition where it's like you immediately go to honeymoon.
Yes. Like
the second your wedding ends.
Yeah.
Like they're being I mean, they're in the house, and she, I guess, goes into her room and changes because she's in some cute little outfit, and they're like, okay, we're off, and everyone's like, oh, yay, like throwing rice and whatever again, and George is trying to get to Annie just to kiss her or whatever, and she's being carried away and blah, and then they go straight to the airport to go on their honeymoon, like that night.
That's how it goes.
So, and then she calls him, and then they have a heart-to-heart. And
everything's good. He's able to let go.
Yeah.
I think that's about everything.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about a little bit of the cast and crew if you want here. So we talked about the other two screenwriters. We got the director Charles Shyer and Nancy Meyer. They were both Oscar nominated for Private Benjamin. Golden Globe nomination for Nancy Meyers for It's Complicated. They've worked on things like Jumping Jack Flash, Baby Boom, Parent Trap, the 1998 version, Smoking the Bandit. This is actually Charles Shyer. He had done Odd Couple, Partridge Family, Smoking the Bandit prior to working with Nancy. The only directing credit for Charles Shyer that was not something that he also wrote was Affair of the Necklace, the Hilary Swank movie, which is odd. Nancy Meyers is also a director. She's directed a lot of the stuff that she's written as well, such as Something's Gotta Give and The Holiday, and she also directed What Women Want, which she did not write. Steve Martin as George Banks. We'll see him again a couple more times. LA Story and Grand Canyon. He's been, of course, in SNL, Muppet Movie, The Jerk, All of Me, Three Amigos, with Martin Short, Little Shop of Horrors, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, all this kind of different stuff. Diane Keaton as Nina, Oscar winner for Annie Hall, nominated for Reds, Marvin's Room, and Something's Gotta Give. She's also been in things like Godfather, Sleeper, Looking for Mr. Goodbar, Manhattan, First Wives Club, and Family Stone. She works with Nancy Meyers quite a bit. And Kimberly Williams-Paisley is someone I didn't really, recognize beyond this. I mean, she didn't have like a...
Yeah, she
didn't have like the breakout
movie,
career.
The second one, and that was that's all I know her from.
I mean, she did a few things. She did a voice in Porco Rosso, the English dub of that. She was in Indian Summer. She was in a TV miniseries called 10th Kingdom, which was kind of a big deal in a sense. She's been on the TV show Nashville, and her other biggest role aside from this is she was in According to Jim, that sitcom with Jim Belushi. She was like the wife in that. Married to Brad Paisley, and I guess they had some sort of like a People magazine write-up of how her wedding was much more subdued compared to like what you see in Father of the Bride movie. Kieran Culkin is Maddie, Emmy nominated for Succession, Golden Globe nomination for Igby Goes Down, also MTV nominated for Breakthrough Actor for that same role. He's been in Cider House Rules, Scott Pilgrim, and we'll see him again in 1991's Only the Lonely. George Newbern as Brian McKenzie, kind of just like the unnecessary, like he's a necessary character in this movie, but also kind of not. Like he doesn't, I don't know.
Yeah.
He's just kind of off to the side. He was in the Working Girl TV series. He's done a lot of voice acting work. He's done in Pirates of Dark Water. He was the voice of Theodore Rex in the movie Theodore Rex. He's been the voice of Superman for the DC animated stuff since 2001. He's also the voice of Sephiroth in Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, and he has also non-voice acting work is Scandal. He was on that for many episodes as well. And then we have Martin Short as Frank Egelhofer. We'll see him again in Pure Luck, so we don't have to talk about him a whole lot here. B.D. Wong, Howard Weinstein. He's going to be in the 1991 movie Mystery Date. He's also in another movie called The Lounge People, which is not on our list. It's not findable anywhere. But he's had a really good career. Nice, diverse roles. Jurassic Park. He was on that TV series All American Girl with Margaret Cho. He's been in Oz, Law and Order SVU for 230 episodes, Gotham, Mr. Robot, where he got an Emmy nomination, and he's in that new Gremlins TV series that they're making for Disney+. So, I think that's just about it. I mean, we could talk about Eugene Levy as the singer at the audition. I thought there would be like more stuff like that kind of sprinkled in too.
Yeah, it was just like, let's bring this one guy in for more comedy.
Yeah, you have like Honk, the caterer.
Yeah.
Played by David Pasquesi, who's in Strangers with Candy and Veep.
Yeah, that was
a nice little scene. I thought there would be like more quirky characters kind of sprinkled in throughout the movie, but that didn't really happen. But yeah, Eugene Levy has like a brief cameo as an auditioning singer for the wedding band, I guess. So this is before he had his big resurgence through like the Christopher Guest movies and American Pie and all this kind of stuff. He was best known to me as like SCTV.
Mm-hmm.
So In terms of the movie itself, we talked about how it is number 9 box office performing movie, $89 million overall, which is pretty dang good. Not much to celebrate on the awards front. You do have a Young Artist nomination for Kieran Culkin. And then at the MTV Movie Awards, you have 2 nominations. One is for Best Comedic Performance for Steve Martin, but he lost to Billy Crystal for City Slickers. And then Best Breakthrough Performance nomination for Kimberly, but she lost to Eddie Furlong for T2. And then it also was part of a quotes montage. And Best Performance by an Animal.
The swans?
I guess the swans. Yeah, it's the only animal I can think of that was in this. So, maybe the dogs.
Yeah, the dogs with the release.
Yeah, maybe. So that was weird. Again, we don't have a copy of the award show, so if you do, let us know so we can.
We also watched The Father of the Bride 3.5 or 3-ish,
yeah,
which came out like right at the beginning of quarantine. That was just like right when it was like, let's all bring the things that we liked 30 years ago to cheer people up or something.
And also act as a fundraiser. It was a fundraiser for the World Central Kitchen. Which I don't know how it raised funds, other than they put a link at the bottom and they're hoping that people would donate if they saw the link, I guess. Yeah, because we watched it like a few days ago. We didn't watch it when it first came out. Cause I didn't know it happened. I knew it came out. But I remember the Fast Times table read with new actors, but that's the only thing I really remember. I just feel like around like the after 5-6 months of like the pandemic, it was like all these actors and actresses like trying to band together to, raise money for random things. And this was one of the things. And it was just like a Zoom call meeting. And I feel like half of the people didn't even want to do this. No, nor should they. I mean, it also seemed like they just got the script that day and were just told to do it. Like, go off of it. I mean, yeah. I don't think there was much rehearsing, if any, on this. Yeah, I mean, it was fine. It was just like a Zoom call, and then Maddie, like Kieran, like you had all the people come back, and then you have Florence Pugh as the daughter of Diane Keaton and Steve Martin, and then you had Ben Platt as the son of Kimberly Williams and George Newberry. And then I forget. And then Kieran Culkin, Maddie. It's mostly him proposing to his girlfriend, but then also wanting to get married on the Zoom call at the same time. And she's like a full-time nurse, so she's like quarantining in a hospital somewhere else. There's a lot of heavy-handed, preachy, pandemic stuff in here. Yes. And it was just, it was like right at the beginning, because you have just Steve Martin as George Banks being like very vigilant about like wash your boxes, washing everything, and then making sure everyone has toilet paper and wipes and whatever. It's weird to say, like, it feels like early pandemic, because it was like the science and like how it is, like it's been like 2 years, but it's like I'm like rolling my eyes at that. Well, even though I shouldn't. Okay, I understand the point of it, but it's also just, I don't know. It felt like a Nick Jr. lecture. Yeah, because it was like, make sure you wash your hands and don't forget this and that, and wash this. It was just like Steve Martin was in a different room than Diane. Well, their characters, Nina and George, like they weren't even in the same room and in the same house. Like Nina was like in the kitchen or whatever, and she's like, George is in the bathroom and has been like quarantining in our own bathroom for however many days for some reason. She didn't even say. She's like, I haven't seen him in a while, because he's like just super vigilant and doesn't want to Yeah.
get anyone sick. And he's wearing like a mask when the Zoom call starts, and then he's like, here, look at me try to take my mask off without even touching it. He uses like pencils or something.
And you see
it was
everyone
just like,
fake
you know,
laugh, and it's
it was a
kind
lot.
of painful to watch. Like, it's even the non-pandemic stuff is very un-Nancy Meyers, like, even though she wrote and directed this.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's
this is the
sappy trite shit that I did not want
right.
and did not get in this actual movie.
Yeah, and then, like, you have, so the girlfriend slash fiance slash wife of Kieran Culkin slash Maddie is Alexandra Shipp. She was in that Tick Tick Boom movie.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a singer, and she's done other stuff, too. But, like, her father is played by Robert De Niro, and I was like, what is this, Meet the Fockers? I'm like, why bring him?
Has a good relationship with Nancy Meyers, I guess.
Yeah, and the best part was having, like, Martin Short as Frank again, and he was, like, their officiant.
Yeah.
That was the best part, I guess.
It was the best part, but it was also still not great.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was an interesting thing. I think it would have been more interesting if they could have made it its own thing instead of a time capsule. This is like literally a time capsule movie that only applies to the 3 months worth of quarantine that it appeared in.
Yeah.
And beyond that, it's just more of like a oddity. It's like, if you want to know what people were thinking back in that part of history,
the very beginning,
this is a good way to figure that out. So, anyway, we can move on to true crime of pop culture.
So TV wise, this was December. So this movie was released December 20th, 1991, right before Christmas. So everyone was probably watching it on Christmas. Who knows? But on ABC, it was the typical TGIF lineup, and there were new episodes, so I was kind of surprised that there weren't any repeats. But, they're all like Christmas related. And then on CBS, there was a Charlie Brown's Christmas that was on.
Okay.
And then after that, we watched this right before we recorded, was like a Christmas special. It was just like a half-hour McDonald's Christmas special.
Well, McDonald's Presents, because there was no McDonald's in the actual story. It was just Ronald McDonald telling the story to the Fry Guys.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
That's what. And then I was thinking, was that a thing? Like, did Ronald McDonald present other things?
I don't
like other specials
that happening. No.
Or I was just like, okay, I don't know.
Maybe it did.
But then, like, did McDonald's release this movie? As you know how McDonald's sort of had.
Yeah, they sometimes would sell like VHS tapes and whatnot. I mean, the American Tail VHS we watched was bought at McDonald's. I don't know. I don't know if they would have.
It was just like presented by McDonald's.
Yeah.
But, it didn't talk about McDonald's at all.
Maybe it's part of some court settlement thing that they had to like fund this.
I mean, the special was The Wish That Changed Christmas, and it was based off of a book, and, it was a 22-minute thing on we watched it on YouTube, and we were just laughing at it, I guess.
It was not good.
I mean, yeah. It's like this little girl who is in an orphanage?
Question mark? But she's like thrown out for Christmas and has to go to a different
all the
orphanage?
Other kids in the orphanage found families for Christmas except for her.
I guess.
And then, like, the owner of this orphanage is like, well, you got to get the fuck out. So I'm gonna
and the girl's like, well, I can stay with my grandma, and she's looking at her books like, nope, you don't have a grandma. Off to Appleton with you.
Yeah, off to this and then it was an infant.
Off to an infant orphanage to you.
And then she, like, doesn't even bother to take her. She's like, get the hell on this train, and don't forget it's this stop, see you never, type of thing. And then, she's like a 10, 11-year-old girl on the train, and she's like, I wish I had a grandma. I wish I had, like, a Christmas present. And, the lady gives her a Christmas present. It's like a pencil box, and she's like, oh, whatever. Her name is Ivy, and then she goes to some random stop, this town called Mill Valley, and then, the lights on the tree black out except for the letters I-V-Y. And she's like, Ivy, that's me.
Oh,
and then maybe my grandma. Maybe my grandma sent this to me.
So dumb.
But then meanwhile, there's like a doll in a store that wants a little girl to buy her, and then there's like an older couple in this town that wants a child. So, the wishes all came true at the end. The older couple gets this child.
They just steal a child off the side of the road.
Yeah, the girl gets the doll gets the girl, the end.
And it's like, will you be my grandma? All you have to do is love me.
She's like, can you do me a huge favor?
Yeah. Ma'am, can you do me a favor? Can you be my grandma? All you have to do is love me. Okay. The end.
The end. I don't know. Watch it on. We have the YouTube link.
The problem is, like, it cuts off, like, a little bit before the actual end.
Yeah, for, like, program. Ronald to McDonald to say.
So we don't know if there's, like, we don't know if there's an end piece with Ronald talking to the Fry Guys about what happened or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll have the YouTube
that
link
was
on
amusing. After that was, they had Moonstruck on CBS Saturday Movie was Moonstruck. And then on Fox is America's Most Wanted, Totally Hidden Video, and then this comedy thing that we talked about before, Best of the Worst. I think that was hosted by Greg Kinnear.
Yeah.
And then on NBC was Matlock, Pacific Station, which we've spoken about before, that had Robert Guillaume in it. And Dear John, and then Reasonable Doubts. So we've talked about all these TV shows before.
But we didn't talk about that Christmas special.
No.
So we got that going for us.
And then moving on to music, as of December 27th, 1991, we have... So these are the bottom 5 again, because top 5, at least number 1 was the Black or White song.
Okay.
Number 100 is this song called All I Need Is You by this band called Blue Train, and I tried really hard to find out who they were, and I really couldn't, except this song was played in an episode of Baywatch.
That would have been, what, years later, though?
It was like in season 3 of Baywatch.
Wasn't Baywatch, didn't that start in like 90-something, 94?
No, Baywatch
5?
was like...
Was that going on in 91?
Yeah.
Oh.
'Cause,
I thought that was later.
Like, Pam and Tommy, like, their whole thing, she was still on Baywatch.
Yeah, but that was like...
That was 95-ish.
Right?
Yeah.
Baywatch. I never watched Baywatch.
Me neither.
I never cared.
Number 99 is the song Lies by the band EMF. This is just kind of like the B-side to their Unbelievable song, I guess. That other song by Blue Train, that was 12 weeks on the chart and it peaked at number 46. This EMF song was 13 weeks on the charts and it peaked at number 18. And number 98 is the song Just Another Girlfriend by the band High Five, or group, I should say, the boy group High Five, where they had that number 1 to 5 hit. I forgot already, the Kissing Game. So this was probably their B-side to the Kissing Game or something.
High Five, that's not the one with Robbie Williams, is it?
No, let's Take That.
Take That, okay.
High Five is kind of like a...
They both sound like candy bars, so...
Oh. High Five is like another New Edition wannabe type group. So that was 5 weeks on the chart and it peaked at number 88. Number 97 is the song Groovin' by UB40, which is like a lesser known song by them.
Yeah.
Besides, this is like Red Wine era. And that was 5 weeks on the chart and it peaked at number 90. Number 96 is a song by Kathy Dennis, which I've spoken about before. She's like another... I've talked about this before. She's like another vitamin C level person. Where she's done a lot of like secret... She's written a lot of hits and produced a lot of hits. And it's like this, and
you just never know about it.
Yeah, it's like you never knew about like all the stuff she's done because she's done it like behind the scenes, and you didn't even know about it until I looked her up one day, like maybe a year ago, and I was like, oh my god, she's like another Vitamin C, where she's still like writing music for other people and their hits. But anyways. Kathy Dennis, the song Everybody Move, and that was only 2 weeks on the chart, and it peaked at number 90.
So then we move on to rankings and ratings then?
Yeah.
On your 1 to 5 star scale, where are you going to put Father of the Bride?
I'm going to give this movie a 3.
I am too. On my 0 to 4 star scale, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 4. It's... Yeah, one of those things where I expected it to be funnier, but I wasn't disappointed that it wasn't. I think I would have liked it more if there were more jokes kind of put in there, if the tone was maybe a little bit more consistent in one way or another, but, it's still enjoyable for what is on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so every movie is worth watching once. Would you watch this again?
Yeah, I would watch this again.
Yeah, this is... Yeah.
I
feel like it's been a while since we said we would actually watch another movie, one of these movies a second time, but...
Yeah, I would watch this and the second one again, because I haven't seen the second movie in a long time.
I would not have seen it since it released, if I saw it back then even.
I just remember, the funny parts with Franck again.
Okay. Yeah, it's good that the whole movie wasn't Franck. It's good to have him in smaller doses in here. But, this is, it was a big hit for a reason. And I think for the most part, if you kind of ignore some of the social stuff about what wedding planning is, like some of the expectations of Father of the Bride's responsibilities have changed since then, but still, It works. If you out there want to watch Father of the Bride as of this recording in June 2022, it's available on TBS, TNT, digital rental, VHS, and DVD. As always, check your local listings. You can find us on all of your major podcasting platforms. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and tell your friends. You can email us at 1991movierewind@gmail.com. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, YouTube. Just search 1991 Movie Rewind, or go to 1991movierewind.com for the full list of movies along with show notes and more. Next week is the last week of our word association month. We're going from Father of the Bride to The Perfect Bride. That's only available on VHS, and we will see you then.